This is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I am at the Indiana State Library this morning, and I'll be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Serving Patrons with Disabilities, Talking Books and Beyond. So welcome everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. I also want to thank our presenter, our Regional Librarian of the Indiana Talking Books and Braille Library here at the Indiana State Library, Maggie Ansty. So before we begin, I want to start off with a few housekeeping items and announcements. To register for other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please check our Indiana State Library's event calendar, which can be found at our website at www.in.gov/library. And the Indiana State Library has many ways that we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. And sound issues. If you have any sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issues that you're experiencing, please know that we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after the webinar is over. This webinar will also be available on our archived webinars page after it's been uploaded to YouTube and transcribed. So again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. LEUs, your LEU will be available for download at the end of the webinar. We'll have that document available for you to download. So make sure you are signed on until the end of the presentation to get your LEU. This session is 1 hour, so you'll get 1 LEU. And questions. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. We'll answer your question as soon as there's a good opportunity. And Maggie does have a spot she's going to stop to take questions, and then also at the end of the presentation as well. And if you have any other questions that you forget about, she has her email on the presentation, so don't hesitate to email her. So I want to thank Maggie, so we'll turn it over to her and start the presentation.
Good morning, and welcome to the webinar, Serving Patrons with Disabilities, Talking Books and Beyond. My name is Maggie Ansty. I've been here with the Talking Book Library for 7 years. And like she said, my email address is on this slide. It's MANSTY. So if there's a question I am not able to get to, please feel free to email me anytime. Okay, so a quick overview of today's webinar. We're going to focus on 3 main things. First, I'm going to tell you about the services available from the Indiana Talking Book and Braille Library and how they can benefit both your libraries and people in your community. Next, I'm going to talk about serving patrons with disabilities at your libraries. Finally, I'm going to talk about some disability resources available in the state of Indiana. I'll take a break for questions in the middle and then again at the end of the webinar. Talking Books is a free library service for Indiana residents who cannot use standard printed materials due to a visual or physical disability. There are a lot of people who suffer vision loss later in life due to age-related diseases, so they don't necessarily know about the resources available to them, like somebody who has been blind their whole life. If they turn to their local library for information, it's important for all of you to be familiar with programs like Talking Books. In 2015, there were 157,000 Hoosiers who suffered from some form of vision loss, which refers to individuals who reported they have serious difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses or contact lenses, as well as those who are blind or unable to see at all. Our library is currently only serving about 8,000 Indiana residents, so we have a very large number of people in Indiana who could benefit from this service but don't know about it. Okay, so the Indiana Regional Library for the Blind, which is called the Indiana Talking Book and Braille Library, is located in downtown Indianapolis at the Indiana State Library. It has been here at the State Library since the current building opened in 1934. We serve as the Indiana Regional Library as part of the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. which I will refer to as NLS, which is part of the Library of Congress. There are 57 regional libraries around the country serving residents of every state and territory of the United States. NLS also provides service to U.S. citizens living abroad. Indiana also has 3 sub-regional libraries that provide library service to local patrons. They are located in Columbus, Evansville, and Maryville. The sub-regional libraries provide most of the same services as the regional library, except for machine lending, Braille, and large print, which is all done from the state library. The Columbus Library serves the counties of Bartholomew, Clark, Crawford, Dearborn, Decatur, Floyd, Franklin, Harrison, Jackson, Jefferson, Jennings, Ohio, Ripley, Scott, Switzerland, and Washington. The Evansville Library serves Davies, Du Bois, Gibson, Knox, Martin, Perry, Posey, Spencer, Vanderburgh, and Warwick counties. And the Maryville Library serves Lake, Jasper, LaPorte, Newton, and Porter counties. All of our libraries share an ILS, so if patrons want a book their sub-regional library doesn't have, it can be sent from any library in the state that happens to have the book. Okay, so I'll cover each of these items in depth, but a quick overview of the materials and services we provide include special playback equipment, digital talking books and magazines, Bard, which is a downloadable, a place to download audiobooks, including Bard Mobile, large print books and magazines, Braille books and magazines, Newsline, and Indiana Voices. Okay, so the application procedure for the Talking Book Library is very straightforward. Applications can be downloaded from our website, or you can call and we'd be happy to mail you one. Fill out all of the requested information on the application, which will include things like a patron's name, address, and date of birth, but also information on the types of books they like to read and any favorite authors they might have. Our computer system uses this information to automatically select books to send, so patrons should remember that these are their reading interests and not necessarily things that they just like. So if you only like reading mystery books, don't check gardening because you like to garden. The application needs to be signed by a competent authority who can verify the patron's qualification for the talking book service. A competent authority can be anyone from a doctor or nurse to a social worker or librarian, except in the case of a reading disability, which must be signed by a medical doctor. Return the application to the library by mail, email, or fax. We will process it the day that we receive it. We give each new patron a call to make sure they understand how the program works, and we send them a welcome packet, which includes things like patron policies and catalogs. When patrons set their account up, they need to decide whether they want to be request only or auto select. With request only, patrons are only sent books they specifically request or books by their list of favorite authors. Whether request or auto select, patrons are of course welcome to request specific books. Talking books is a great option for qualifying homebound patrons in your communities since books are sent directly to them. It's also a great option for patrons who may need items in special formats in your communities who have just kind of read everything that you have. Okay, so special playback equipment. Each talking book patron receives a digital talking book player to keep for as long as they are using the service. The digital talking book player was designed with a blind user in mind. There are 2 versions of the player: the standard player, which is depicted in the picture on the slide, as well as the advanced player. The advanced player has all of the same features as the standard player, but it comes with some additional navigational capabilities, which are useful for books like the Bible or something that requires a lot of fast forwarding and stuff to find what you want to read. The player has big buttons that are often in a shape that represents what the button does. So the fast forward and rewind buttons are shaped like arrows, and the sleep button is shaped like a crescent moon. The player has a built-in user guide, which explains what each button does. The user guide will play if there is no book in the player and you press one of the buttons. There is a headphone jack on the side of the player and a USB port on the side of the player. The USB port is for playing downloaded books on a flash drive. Other accessories available from the library include headphones, breath switches, and pillow speakers. NLS is currently working on a remote control for the player. There's also a high volume version of the player available for people who suffer from severe hearing loss. Obtaining this player does require further certification from an audiologist, as it can damage hearing if you don't actually need it. Okay, so digital talking books are the main type of book we circulate. Digital talking books are audiobooks on a flash drive, which has been encased in plastic to make them more durable, harder to lose, and easier to handle for people with mobility impairments. We have 25,000 audiobook titles here in the building. There are an additional 50,000 titles that can either be downloaded or ordered for patrons from a central location. We have a mixture of books NLS recorded specifically for the Talking Book program, as well as commercial recordings that NLS obtained through contracts with the producers. All books and the player are mailed to patrons' homes using what is called free matter for the blind, which basically means that all the postage has already been paid for. Books come in a plastic mailing container, which are most often blue. They can also be clear, gray, or red. And they have a mailing card in the container. When a patron is ready to return a book, they can flip the card around and place it back in the mail. We can use our circulation system to tailor what types of books are sent to patrons. For example, someone might want mysteries and romance books, but they don't want violence or sex in those books. Our circ system can use that information and filter out books with those kind of things in them. Libraries can sign up as an institution and receive a talking book player and book to have on hand for demonstration purposes. Okay, so BARD stands for Braille and Audio Reading Download. While I just talked about patrons receiving audiobooks through the mail, our patrons can also choose to download their books from a website called BARD. All of the audiobooks we have physical copies of in the library, as well as what NLS calls retrospective items, which are items originally produced in an older format and later digitized, are available on BARD. So there are about 80,000 audiobooks that patrons can download. There are also 13,000 Braille titles available through BARD and 66 Braille and audio magazines. There are never any wait lists or due dates on items being downloaded from BARD, so our patrons can download whatever they want, whenever they want. When I'm on 60th in line for a book on Overdrive, I'm always jealous of this. Libraries can sign up as an institution for a BARD demo account. So there are mobile apps available for BARD for iOS, Android, and Kindle. BARD Mobile is slightly easier to use than downloading books from the BARD website, because you don't have any files to unzip or transfer to flash drives, or even just finding the file on your computer. Those are the steps that really seem to trip our patrons up. You can also use BARD Mobile for downloading and reading Braille books by pairing the app through Bluetooth with a refreshable Braille display. And I have a picture of a refreshable Braille display device in a few slides. We have patrons who have sent their talking book player back to us and now just use BARD Mobile. The first picture here is a screenshot of the now reading screen of the iOS app, so it looks just like the talking book player. The middle picture is the Android app, and the last picture is how the navigation is displayed on the Kindle app. Okay, so Braille books and magazines. We have approximately 20,000 Braille titles in our collection for all age ranges. Books for children are often what is called twin vision, sometimes also called print Braille. Twin vision is basically the normal copy of a children's picture book with a Braille page inserted between each page. Twin vision books are a great way for blind parents to be able to read to their sighted children, or for blind children to follow along while their sighted parent reads to them. If you can imagine, Braille books can present a bit of a storage problem, which is why we are happy to have them here so you don't have to. There's a 105-volume Braille book entitled Familiar Quotations across from my desk, which takes up 21 feet of shelf space. The picture on this slide is a refreshable Braille device called an Orbit Reader 20. You would be able to read a downloadable Braille book using this device by pairing it with the Bard mobile app. Traditionally, refreshable Braille devices have been too expensive for the library to provide. However, the Orbit 20 is the first affordable refreshable Braille device. NLS is currently conducting a pilot program in Massachusetts on whether or not it would ever be feasible for them to provide patrons this device like they do with the talking book player. So that's kind of exciting. And in case anybody wonders how a refreshable Braille device works, it works exactly how it sounds. The row of Braille cells in the front will refresh for each line of text that you're reading, and then the buttons on the side are how you forward to the next line of text. Okay, so large print books. We also have a very extensive collection of large print materials in the library. Large print is not one of the materials NLS provides, so we do have a bit more flexibility in who we loan those books to. We currently have about 15,000 titles in our collection, some of them dating back to the 60s, so lots of print items that people can't find elsewhere. Patrons who want to sign up for large print would fill out the same application as for audiobooks. Large print books are also sent directly to homes using free Matter for the Blind. We get a lot of people signing up for large print who later have to transition into audio due to continued vision loss. So it's really a great way for patrons to become familiar with the program while they still have some vision. All of our large print books are also available for patrons around the state to borrow through Evergreen, Circs, or just a normal ILL request. So you don't have to be a talking book patron to utilize our large print collection. We encourage libraries around the state, especially if you're a small library, to sign up to receive a large print deposit collection. With that, we would send you anywhere from 5 to 50 books for you to keep at your library for about 3 months. While they're there, they can circulate to your patrons as part of your collection. And at the end of that time, you would return those books for a new supply of materials from us. Indiana Voices recording program. The Indiana Voices is a program here at the Indiana State Library that records books by Indiana authors, books that have an Indiana setting, or books with another point of Indiana interest that otherwise wouldn't be available in an accessible format. The program is largely dependent on volunteers. Currently, the program has produced 160 audiobook titles for patrons, and we're currently in the process of adding these titles to Bard so that patrons both in Indiana and around the country can enjoy them. Just this week, NLS let us know that we currently have 2 Indiana Voices books on the most popular downloads of the last 30 days list on Bard, which is a nationwide list. So that was exciting for for us to hear. Okay, so there are several newspaper reading services available for patrons in Indiana. The first one is NFB Newsline, which is available to any talking book patron in the state. There are 400 publications, including 12 Indiana papers, such as the Indianapolis Star, Evansville Courier and Press, Muncie Star Press, Northwest Indiana Times, and the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, available through Newsline. Newsline also does emergency alerts and weekly ads. Patrons can access Newsline through a touch-tone telephone, their mobile app. They can get an email, or they can just access it through the Newsline website. Another option are radio reading services. Iris is a radio reading service from WFYI in Indianapolis, which is broadcast to a special radio or can be listened to online. Iris reads the Indy Star from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. They broadcast other newspapers, magazines, and various programs throughout the day. And there is no geographical limit on who can use the Iris On Demand service. The audio reading service from the Allen County Public Library reads the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette live daily from 9 to 11. There is other programming available throughout the day through that service as well. WNIN in Evansville, sponsored by the United Way of Posey County, does local broadcasts from 8 to noon on weekdays and 9 to 2 on weekends. So you might check around in your area to see if there is a radio reading service specific to your area. But those are just 3 examples in Indiana. NLS has partnered with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in support of its U.S. Currency Reader program, which provides currency reader devices free of charge to individuals who are blind or visually impaired. The program is part of the government's Meaningful Access initiative to assist individuals who are experiencing difficulties identifying U.S. currency. The currency reader, called the iBill Talking Banknote Identifier, is a compact device that announces a note's value by voice, pattern of tones, or patterns of vibration. Users insert a bill into the device and press the button on the device's side to have the denomination read to them. The currency reader does not identify foreign or counterfeit banknotes. NLS also provides patrons access to a music collection that includes Braille and large print musical scores, recorded instructional materials, and recorded materials about music and musicians. So just to clarify, this isn't where, it's not like a music service where you can listen to music. It's for people who play music and need like sheet music and stuff. Some digital audio and e-Braille materials are available to download from Bard. And all talking books patrons are eligible for music services. NLS serves music patrons directly from Washington, D.C. So our library has no part of on the music service, but it is available. Okay, so that was a bit about the Talking Book Library. Have there been any questions about anything I've covered so far? Or does anybody have any questions now?
Not yet, but Georgine did add her email and a link to the local news and magazine info from Allen County.
Okay, great.
So she put that in there earlier. So maybe we've got 1 or 2 or 3. Okay, looks like our software is just a tiny bit slow, so we're just waiting for those questions to pop up on our end. Might be 2 or 3 people typing. Sharon asks, is there a list of books for kids, like preschool?
We don't have a ready list of books available for preschool, but you can search our catalog and specify the age range of what you're looking for. Our catalog can be a little tricky, so if you do want to email me, I can give you exact instructions on how to do that.
Another question, if a person is interested in the currency reader but not the talking books, do they just need to fill out the application and designate they only want the currency reader?
So there is a specific application for the currency reader. If you go to NLS's website, which is www.nls.loc.gov, I believe they have a direct link on the navigation part of their website to the currency reader application. But even the currency reader application is going to need to be signed by a competent authority who can verify that they do qualify to receive one.
Okay, we have another one. We have an adult patron with a reading disability who would like to listen to a book while reading along in the printed copy. Would talking books be suitable for her?
So patrons with reading disabilities are eligible for our service, but due to a very dated law from the 80s, their application will need to be signed by a medical doctor who can, medical doctors can't actually verify whether somebody has a reading disability, but that's what NLS needs. So a medical doctor would need to sign that application. But yes, they would definitely be able to get audiobooks.
One more person taping. Connie asks, how should libraries promote this wonderful program to their patrons?
Well, Connie, I wish I knew the answer to that. You can definitely put information about the Talking Book program around your large print collections and your audiobook collections. If you think you have a patron that would benefit from our service, please don't hesitate to tell them about it or have them contact us about it directly. Yeah, definitely put a link on your webpage to the Talking Book program for patrons who would qualify. And then, maybe just have a list of resources available for people who are looking for information on something like this.
Okay, one more person typing. Charlotte asked, do you have an informational packet you could send us so that we may display them to make patrons aware?
Yeah, I can definitely send anybody who wants information. I can send anybody an informational packet. Just let me know.
And one more. And Roberta says, oh, please send me one. That sounds great. Yeah, we'll send, like I said, we'll send all the links, or if you want to email directly to Maggie, either way, we'll somehow get it to you, and it can be sent through Info Express, right?
I'll send it to you using Free Matter for the Blind.
There you go.
Okay. So, one more question?
We might have one more. We'll see.
Okay.
Like Celia.
Okay.
Yes, we want them sent. Yeah, okay.
Well, just let us know who wants packets, and we'll be on that. Okay, so on to the second half of the webinar, which is going to cover serving patrons with disabilities at your libraries. I'll give some kind of basic tips on interacting with and helping patrons with disabilities, and a few ideas on assistive technology devices that might help better serve your patrons. So I don't have really enough time to cover anything too in-depth, but just kind of an overview. So universal design is the idea that you should produce or create buildings, products, and environments that are inherently accessible to older people, people without disabilities, and people with disabilities. And there are 7 principles of universal design. which are equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. So while universal design should certainly be taken into account with architecture, I doubt many of us are designing our own libraries, so there's only so much we can do with that. But you can apply the principles of universal design to things like the way you arrange furniture in your library, the lighting that you provide in areas where people are reading, the design of wayfinding signs in your libraries, the way you set up for programs, and many other things. Okay, so assisting patrons with blindness or visual impairments. When assisting patrons with blindness or visual impairments, speak directly to your patron in a normal tone of voice. Do not direct your conversation to their sighted companion if they have one. Be sure to identify yourself when you begin speaking, and don't walk away without letting your patron know. You don't want to leave them talking to an empty chair. When giving directions to someone, reference a clock face. Don't point at where things are. I had a really hard time with that one. I still do. You can also escort a patron by offering them your elbow. Don't grab them by the arm or hand, even though you think they might need to be shown where they're going. The types of materials you should have available for patrons are large print books and magazines. You might have some Braille books or Twin Vision Braille books that they can look at, and audiobooks in various formats. Also, be aware of whether your existing DVD collection has audio description available, which you can usually find listed in the language section of the DVD. If you're going to do something like a big read program or one city, one book, please be sure to pick something that is available in an alternate format, because it's very disheartening for people when they can't participate in something like that. Also, make sure your website is accessible. You can check with something like the Wave Web Accessibility tool. An accessible website will have things, will utilize things like alt text for labeling exactly what a picture is or what a link is, instead of just saying link. So that will allow users who are using a screen reader to be able to navigate your website better. If you're making signs or handouts or something else, think about how someone with low vision will be able to see them. For a really basic example of this, a dark background with light text is good, as is a light background with dark text. But making a sign with something like a black background with red text is really something you would want to avoid, because there isn't very much contrast there. Okay, some resources that you might know about for blind and visually impaired patrons include Bookshare, which is an online library for people who cannot use standard print. Bookshare is free for students in the US. For adults, there is a yearly membership fee. A nice thing about Bookshare is that if a student needs a book for a class and they can't find an accessible format anywhere else, Bookshare will make that a priority to add that to their library. Learning Ally is another place where students can get audio textbooks who are blind or visually impaired, as well as students with dyslexia and other learning disabilities. There's also a yearly membership fee for that. The National Braille Press produces low-cost Braille books for children and adults. The American Printing House for the Blind has education, workplace, and independent living products and services for people who are visually impaired. And then the Media Access Group is a website where you can find information on DVDs that have audio descriptioning and captioning for movies and television. So that's very useful. As for assistive technology for patrons who are blind or visually impaired, first check to see what assistive technologies might already be on computers and other devices at your library. In Microsoft Microsoft, you can go to the Ease of Access Center, and you might find things like the magnifier and narrator, which will be useful to people with visual impairments. Mac computers and iOS devices also have extensive accessibility features built in. Also, make sure you know how to increase the font size on computers and websites if needed. To increase the font size on a website, it's as easy as pressing the Control and plus key on your keyboard. Screen reading software is essential for blind users to be able to use a computer. The most common screen reader is JAWS, which can be pretty expensive. NVDA is a free open source alternative that it has been gaining popularity lately. Magnification software is usually designed to function like a magnifying glass. It increases the size of what you might be hovering over, and sometimes that is all a patron is going to need. It's helpful to have a scanner with OCR if your library can afford one. This allows a user to take a picture of a document and then have the document read to them. It's very useful for things like reading mail, bills, etc. In this picture, there's an example of a video magnifier with text-to-speech capabilities. That's what OCR is, in case anybody was confused. If you have something like this in your library, put it somewhere the user can expect to have some privacy for reading sensitive personal documents. So you might put it so that the screen faces a wall instead of the public, so that people can't see their bills on the screen or something like that. Okay, so assisting patrons with hearing impairments and deafness. Once again, look directly at who you are speaking to and maintain eye contact. Don't direct your conversation to an interpreter or any other companion who is with your patron. Speak naturally. There's no need to shout or exaggerate the movement of your lips when you're forming words. Use gestures, pen and paper, or type back and forth on a computer if needed. You can gently touch the shoulder, get in the line of sight of and wave, or tap on the countertop to get someone's attention. Staff can do whatever they feel most comfortable with. Also, be familiar with your library's policy on interpreters for events, and be sure to let patrons know how much advance notice you need for making the necessary arrangements for them. Okay, so some assistive technology for patrons with hearing impairments or deafness. One of the problems people with hearing impairments encounter when using a computer is when a website or program uses audio cues. Sound Sentry, which is another program that comes standard on Windows and Apple computers, will change audio cues into flashes on the screen for somebody who with a hearing impairment. A teletypewriter, also known as TTY, allows people who are deaf and hard of hearing to make calls to each other. And with the assistance of relay systems, users can also communicate with people who do not have TTY systems. So make sure staff have a basic understanding of TTY and relay services, because it can be a bit jarring the first time you get a call from one. The call will identify itself as a relay call when it begins, but it still can be a little strange. Relay Indiana is a free service that provides full telecommunications accessibility to people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impaired in Indiana. This service allows users with special telecommunication devices to communicate with standard users through special trained relay operators. And this is a free service for Indiana residents with an annual household income below $71,000. Another type of relay service is video relay service. VRS enables a deaf or hard of hearing person to make and receive telephone calls through a communications assistant who is a qualified American Sign Language interpreter. So they'll be signing to the deaf user and talking to you. Okay, so assisting patrons with mobility impairments. Individuals with mobility impairments may be limited in their ability to move, have reduced use of certain muscle groups, or have a combination of the two. They might use things like canes, walkers, wheelchairs, crutches, scooters, large grip pens, grabbers, or something else. When helping someone with a mobility impairment, first ask, once again in a normal tone of voice, no need to shout, what is the best way I can help you? Let the patron guide you. Respect the patron's privacy. Don't ask questions about their disability or the cause of it. Keep public areas in your library free from obstructions and tripping hazards. So we have these tripod sign holders all over our building that I'm always telling my boss are tripping hazards, but yeah. Make sure displays do not impede access. Don't hang things on or decorate hand railings in your libraries. If you're talking to someone in a wheelchair for longer than a minute, find somewhere to sit so that you can be at the same eye level as them. Have things available like magnifying glasses, pens with large grips, page turners, tote bags, and signature guides available for patrons, and make sure your staff know where to find them when they're needed. And you can find stuff like that on the American Printing House website that I shared earlier. Have tables in all areas of your library that are accessible to patrons in wheelchairs. So have them in the adult section, have them in the children's section, have them in all the sections. So some assistive technology that you might have available for library patrons might be alternative pointing devices for computers, such as trackballs, touchpads, touch screens, handheld pointing devices, or joysticks. You might have an alternative keyboard available if a patron needs it. There's one depicted in this picture that is a keyboard with large type and high contrast for users. Voice recognition is an alternative to typing on a keyboard and is therefore a great alternative for people who have a disability that makes using a standard keyboard challenging. And an example of a voice recognition software would be Dragon Naturally Speaking. And then adjustable height workstations with chairs that provide support and have armrests. The adjustable height workstation should also be equipped with an adjustable keyboard tray. Okay, and now I'm just going to cover a couple of disability resources to be aware of in Indiana. I would definitely encourage you to compile a more comprehensive list with plenty of local resources available to have on hand to give to patrons. Okay, first, these centers for independent living. At our library, we find that the Centers for Independent Living in the state are an excellent resource to share with patrons. Unfortunately, there are some unserved areas in the northern part of the state. Independent living centers provide 5 standard core services for people. First, they provide peer counseling, which provides people the opportunity to meet mentors with similar disabilities or experiences. Next, they provide information and referral services, which help connect individuals to resources they need. You might contact your local independent living center to make sure they know about any services you provide so that you can be part of their referral program. Next, individual and systems advocacy, which focuses on assisting and teaching people the skills needed to navigate complex disability programs and laws, and to assist with obtaining community-based services and supports. They also do independent living skills, which trains and assists people with disabilities to gain the personal living skills and service supports they need in order to maintain independence in their homes and community settings. This may include things like instruction on personal care, coping, financial management, social skills, and household management. It may also include education and training necessary for living in the community and participating in community activities. Finally, they provide transition services, which facilitate the transition of people with disabilities from nursing homes and other institutions to home and community-based living. It provides assistance to those at risk of entering an institution and facilitates the transition of youth with disabilities into higher education, the workforce, and the community. You might also contact your independent living center so they can include you in any health fairs or events they host. They're usually pretty eager for people to have tables. Additionally, you can reach out to them to participate in any similar events that you might host. So if you're hosting a health fair at your library, definitely try to get your independent living center there. And finally, we have Easterseals Crossroads, which is a great resource that serves people statewide. And I'm going to focus on their INDATA project. INDATA is a federally funded program that is designed to increase access and awareness to assistive technology. So their core services include virtual online training, assistive technology evaluations, information and referral, funding assistance, public awareness and education, one-on-one training, device demonstration, device loan, reutilized computers, and equipment reutilization. Their equipment library is a great resource to know about, as it gives people thinking about purchasing an expensive piece of assistive technology the opportunity to borrow that device and try it out before they buy it. They also produce a weekly podcasts called Assistive Technology Update, Assistive Technology FAQ, and Accessibility Minute, which you might find helpful. They also produce great YouTube videos on assistive technology, which are released each Monday. I've watched a few of them, and they're great for discovering new assistive technology devices and getting a basic understanding of their purpose, as well as discovering how you can use devices you already have for assistive technology. I watched one of them, and I was amazed that I could turn my personal iPhone into a pretty good magnifier. I didn't know that was a feature. So, and here's a list of resources that I used to put this webinar together, and you'll of course get this list when we share the webinar, so you don't need to try to write them down. Okay, well, are there any more questions?
Roberta did ask if you happen to know if there's a CIL for Elkhart County.
Can I go back?
Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I do have the map of independent living centers. The unserved area for independent living centers is sort of a swath across the, below Lake County, sort of across the northwestern part of the state. Oh. Okay, so here is, oh, no.
Maybe, it looks like it's not transitioning very well.
Well, the link to the map is on the PowerPoint as well.
Someone's got it. Joe put it up there. She's got the link in the chat box.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
So there, the white area in the north is the area that's unserved. But I think I read that any independent living center, if you call them for referral services, they'll help anyone regardless of where they're located. Okay. So are there any more questions?
Roberta said thanks.
Okay, well, it doesn't really look like there are, oh, maybe there's a question.
And I'll just go ahead and put the sharing file up there if you have it, but we'll still take questions. We've got a few more minutes.
Okay.
Okay, and I also added a survey link if you want to take that later. And we'll just wait here until if there's any other questions.
Okay, and I will say once again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is mansty@library.in.gov. I can actually just type it in the box.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Maggie. This was great. And again, also thanks for everybody who was here today for